This is the International and Interstate Perspectives panel, moderated by DiEnna at the NY-GEO 2018 conference held on April 19th, 2018 in Albany, New York. There's no visual presentations, so you'll just see the same slide as the moderator and the panelists speak. Enjoy.
DiEnna, this is your conscience. Start your panel.
I was waiting for more people. If you would sit down. I am sitting down, just in case anyone wants to know. This is the International and Interstate. Am I right, sir? Unless we move Massachusetts out of the country, this is not just international. But we have a bunch of panelists here that are really well versed in this from other countries, and some from other countries that are now working in this country. And then we have Canada, and I don't have to tell Jim where that is, but this technology is really growing, as you've heard all this conference. Some of the folks on this panel have done this a long time in their countries, and but we're picking up. So I'm not going to introduce everybody. Everyone's going to introduce themselves. You've got 5 minutes. You've got the gentleman with the hook down there going to tell you what's going on. And Tony, I think you are first.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, I'm Tony Ennis. I work for GEO-NII. I worked for GEO-NII for probably the last 15, 16 years, initially in the UK. I first came across them when I saw them trying to drill a borehole down to about 120 feet at Kingswood Hospital. I am a civil engineer, and I spent most of my life drilling holes, very large holes, and filling them with concrete and steel for foundations for buildings. And it was that time when I suddenly thought, well, why can't I put geothermal loops into these foundations? I presented it to the Skanska board who I was working for. They really liked the idea. They told me to take 6 months out and go and put a business case together to do it. And that's exactly what we did. We joined forces with GEO-NII, Geothermal International, who is the G and the GI, and we tried to sell the concept of energy foundations on that first particular project, but the piles were too short. We ended up installing a lake loop that we all saw at King's Mill Hospital, which was a 3,000-ton system that's operating really nicely today, delivering all of the cooling to that hospital. We then sort of our work gradually increased quite dramatically, and stuff got done. Geothermal, we did a big energy pile system in central London. At the same time, there was a Merton rule that came out. It was called the 10% Merton rule, and the requirement there was it was a planning requirement for all developers. They had to present a building scheme with a 10% renewable solution, and it captured all developers. And I would say that there's two types of developers. The developers that want to build fast, cheap, and then sell quickly. Those are our enemies. They do not want to use ground source heat pumps. They do not want to install our technology. And on large-scale commercial solutions, I would say that we need a big stick with those guys. It's the 10% rule that really hit those guys. And I see that in America today. That is definitely the case. The Merton rule got implemented across the UK fairly quickly, but at the same time there was a feed-in tariff and a renewable heat incentive talked about. Unfortunately, the renewable heat incentive in the UK, the feed-in tariff and the renewable heat incentive didn't get introduced at the same time. The feed-in tariff came along and it sort of hit our market, the geothermal market. And what we then found was that over time there was an election came up, and the government at the time said we're going to put a hold on the renewable heat incentive introduction, and so a further 18 months, 2 years came along before the renewable heat incentive came along, and when it did, biomass, or biomass as I call it, got the largest tariff, and again it was like a dog kicking the nuts basically for the geothermal industry in the UK, and even today, 20 one of the reasons why I'm now in America, because the commercial geothermal world sort of fell apart very significantly. The residential side of it is obviously improving. The problem with the renewable heat incentive was, I believe, there were people that had stronger lobby groups for the biomass. But it's now being equalised, so we've now got a better incentives towards geothermal. Geothermal now has a better incentive in the UK and helps sort of the residential market. But I'll come back to the planning requirement being an important instrument for the developers, that I call our enemies, that would not want to install this kind of equipment. There's a planning requirement that perhaps meets the 20–30% renewable targets that we see across the states. I'm now in the US full time, trying to raise the profile of geothermal solutions. So, and I see what Meserve are doing in New York as an absolutely fantastic solution. So I welcome that with open arms. My company was based in Chicago, and I'm kind of thinking, why am I in Chicago? I should be in New York. That's 1 minute time, so I'm going to pass on to
Tony, thanks. And we're going to have questions at the end. I talk with my hands and try not to put anything up here. It's the only thing I can reach. We're going to have questions afterwards, and next we have Jim Bolger from Ontario Geothermal, and I was just at their conference, which was a spectacular conference, and the great part about that is we had about 40% young people there, right, Jim?
Yeah.
Not including you and I.
Not including you and I.
Jim, it's on you.
Thanks, Jack. My name is Jim Bolger. I'm the president of the Ontario Geothermal Association. Thanks to Bill and their entire team. It's been a fantastic experience to be here. I wasn't able to make it last year, but I found this to be a very engaging and challenging opportunity for our industry. Just a little background on Ontario. We had kind of the perfect storm in terms of political situation in Canada, where we had our Prime Minister who was very conscious of trying to reduce carbon emissions. We had a very progressive provincial government who created a cap and trade system to charge people for their carbon emissions, and a climate change action plan. And the cap and trade system, as opposed to a carbon tax, has created an environment where they've collected in excess of $2 billion in 2 years since it's been created. And that money is all being reinvested in renewable or clean energy opportunities. So it hinges a lot on the political climate. We got engaged early as our Ontario Association. We had a team of people, some of which are here at the conference the last couple of days, that got together with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. We negotiated, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change at the time was a gentleman called Glenn Murray, who had a real passion for geothermal, so it worked very nicely. He set a goal of 1 million geothermal systems installed by 2030, which sounds great until conceptually the rubber has to hit the road. We now have a program in place that is hinged on loop sizing as opposed to equipment sizing. So we created criteria as an industry that you have to meet 90% of the annual heating load. You're allowed to install 1 ton capacity larger loop than what the equipment sizing is. And we also stipulated minimum loop lengths based on our geology and our climate. So as an example, for vertical boreholes, you have to have a minimum of 180 feet of borehole, 1.25 inch pipe. And if it's 3/4 pipe, it has to be 200 feet per ton. And you're allowed to install 1 size bigger. So we really tried to create an environment where historically people would say that their geothermal system was not keeping up, the auxiliary heat was turning on, so we wanted to create a platform and a criteria that would ensure, or the hope to ensure, that people would be well satisfied, equipment efficiencies would live up to manufacturer specs, and that people would be happy for the foreseeable future. One of the things that we also took on, we have a province and people that are fixated on what we have a new terminology for, which is referred to as energy poverty. A lot of the rural communities who aren't serviced by gas all want gas. And so our biggest gas utility, Enbridge, approached the Ontario Energy Board and made an application that they were going to run gas lines to all of rural Ontario. And they wanted to do it on a rate-based situation. We're a volunteer organization, but we felt so compelled that that was the wrong answer. And somehow we rallied the troops, and we called on the Vice President, Stan Reesman, who's at this conference, and Dave Atherton, who had a long history in the industry, but we somehow talked into volunteering to work with us. And we presented a case where we testified at that hearing, and we exposed that there was going to cost them $25,000 per door to run gas. In reality, it was going to be on rate base. We fought it, and we stopped that, and we said that we have a cheaper solution and a better solution in context of the new carbon. I could talk for another 10 minutes, but I just got the signal here. So it's a passion for us, and we really appreciate the collaboration that's going on with NY-GEO, and look forward to seeing if we can't build the capacity of our industry. One of the things I said, a mantra for me, we have our committee, the technical committee was made up of all the major manufacturers around one table. And I don't know, I've been around this industry for some time, a lot longer, but that doesn't happen very often. And the one thing I'll say, we continue as an industry to fight over the less than 1% market share. And if I challenge people with no other thing, we need to find a way to collaborate together and cooperate, because the enemy is the other 99%. And if we work together, we will all be so busy that we won't know what to do. So.
Hear, hear. Well said. And just as a backup, the utility up there that he mentioned, the president just called me last Thursday, so they're going to be fully engaged with this as a utility.
Boy, Enbridge, who we bought at the OEB, is now signed an NDA with the Ontario Geothermal Association, and we're now applying to the OEB to rate-based geothermal infrastructure coming up shortly. So
great.
They now became a potential partner.
Super.
Sorry to take up some of your time.
For those of us that are on the emails, the young lady that's going to speak now is the band leader of the RTA emails, and the people that read those are Helle, you're up, and I want to thank you for doing that. And I don't know how you do it because I pull my hair out. But she does play drums. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'd like to send out those emails and look at the discussions with Dave and set up the presentation. Yeah. And so my name is Helle Grønli. I'm an associate research scientist at Yale, and that's how I started to coordinating this alliance as well. Prior to that, I was at a program manager in Norway, developing program for supporting energy efficiency and renewable heating and cooling in buildings. So I would like to start giving some information about Norway and trying to take some takeaways from that to the region. Norway is a very highly electrified country, dominated by electric heating. So that's kind of where this region want to go. And the electricity is almost 100% renewable through hydropower generation. So that's kind of important background information. The winter peak is our challenge in Norway, not the summer peak. and particularly in years where there's cold temperature or cold weather and dry, not so much precipitation. And that's caused some issues for the electricity grid. So 20 years ago, Norway started the process of transforming its heating and cooling market through establishing an energy fund that has been centralized through one organization. So there's one organization administering grant programs. And it started a broad approach based on technology neutrality, so that the market has developed different solutions to that. An alternative and flexible infrastructure through establishing of district energy and community grids has been an important element to take heating load off the electricity grid. And 82% of the district energy has been built after year 2000, now covers 10% of the heat demand in Norway. Taking out fuel oil boilers in residential and commercial buildings has also been very important, and heat pumps have played a very important role there. And going from almost zero in year 2000 to 73,000 heat pumps sold in 2016, so we're approaching 1 million heat pumps. Ground source heat pumps has a stable share of that, around 3,000 per year, particularly in new construction and where you have big retrofits. So what made this development was the takeaway. So there's more elements driving or helping grow the market, and policy, and the market itself, and the industry. So, well, that's where I would like to point to the takeaway. And one thing I would like to point to is that, yeah, subsidized, we've had subsidized, but there's a mix of measures that have contributed to the development, not subsidies by the subsidies alone. And one important element is the building code, banning fuel oil boilers from year 2007 in new construction, and from year 2020 banned in all buildings. So that's one important element. And at the same time, the building code put up incentives for or required a certain share of renewable energy in the building. So that's the new construction, meaning that heat pumps had a boost from that. Another thing is labeling. Passive house standard needs certificate or needs equivalent and energy labeling. And particularly the needs labeling has been embraced by the market, and it's now so what I wanted to take away from that is that, you know, the development and the interest in green buildings is actually a very good thing also for the heat pump industry, which should be in place, because it's very beneficial for that. And the other thing I would like, or the last thing I would like to point to is actually related to your last comment about cooperating, not only in the geothermal industry, but also across technologies, because there are shared challenges in the market side, shared challenges on, you know, infrastructure in buildings. That's the challenge we saw in Norway. We had electric heating help you then install ground source heat pumps that needs a transporter system. So, you know, I just want to say that air source heat pumps may have a lower cost, COP, but they could also help grow your market through making the customers more aware. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have the opportunity and the inclination, you may want to get on the RTA's website and have a voice on what's happening. Göran Hellström is from Sweden. Sweden obviously is doing a lot. They've got their own thing going. We've had a lot of contact with Sweden lately. And Göran, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my third time here at the conference, and I'm impressed and also inspired to see the increase in attendance and also the interest for implementation and financial solutions. I see there are some similarities in the geology between Sweden and New York State. It's Manhattan. You can see the bedrock as we can do in Stockholm as well.
Göran,
I made it a bit far away. And when you look at the ground source heat pump market in Sweden, it started out in the late 70s when we had a referendum on nuclear energy, so we decided to decommission it and give a lot of research money to renewable alternatives. The nuclear power is still there, but we are reaping the benefits of the investment in research that we did in the late 70s. And the ground source heat pumps took off around 1980, and then there was a drop around 1984 when the oil price went down. And in the early 90s, the oil price started to go up again. I should mention we don't have a gas grid, so it's electric, biomass, district heating sources. But the government had what they call the technical procurement competition to promote ground source heat pumps in 1994, 1995. And the winner was assured 2,000 installations for their winning concept. And that kind of caught on and got a lot of media attention. And the market developed from that, from about 2,000 to 3,000 installations before to 10,000 installations after this competition. And 10 years later, we had 40,000 installations per year. What we can see today is a certain saturation effect, because we have 500,000 installations, primarily for single-family houses, and we have about 1.2 million single-family houses in Sweden. So about 40% of the houses have ground source heat pumps. And we have 9 million people. So per capita, we are the kind of the world leader in installations. And it's well known. It's a well-known technology for everyone. And for commercial projects, it's on the table in every project. A typical installation in Sweden would be a 7 to 11 kilowatts installation heat pump. This would require 125 to 225 meter of borehole. And the cost of drilling is around $9 per feet, including the pipe and the antifreeze. It's not common to grout the boreholes in Sweden. They are left ungrouted, so the pipes are hanging in groundwater, which makes the boreholes loop installation cheaper. And we're using thinner plastic pipes. So a typical depth is around 600 feet, say the average, and the deepest ones are 2,000 feet. Typical design is to design the heat pump operation with 70% design capacity, and the other 30% is electric resistance heating. So the heat pump will cover about 98% of the energy load. And the forward temperature in the systems are around 50 to 65 degrees for domestic hot water as well. They made we have a lot of district heating in Sweden, and they have an annual review of the cost comparison between district heating and ground source heat pump, and they find that the ground source heat pump is cheaper than district heating in 75% of the cities. There is a new interest from the district heating utilities, which are also electric utilities, to promote ground source heat pump, sometimes even owning and selling energy through ground source heat pump systems. And there is also the possibility, since district heating is kind of a monopoly, the electric grid is deregulated, so some companies go into competing situations and install ground source heat pumps which are electrically driven. So they can sell heat in other areas. I would like to mention also some of the European activities shortly. There is, on the European level, there is a collaboration on assembling operational data from larger installations for quality insurance, also quality insurance of borehole completion. And so they are looking at the grouting process to see if it is completed, and it's now common to dope the materials with magnetite, so you can check the completion through measuring devices in your pipes. And another important thing is what they call smart thermal grids. There is in in Switzerland, a city where they have a citywide distribution. It's actually Waterloop, which is citywide, and it's hooked up for free cooling of data centers, hospitals, ice hockey rinks, and it's a source for heat pumps. The last is an example from the technical high school in Zurich, the campus called Hungerberg. They have measured for their smart thermal grid an annual CUP for heating of 9. So they buy 9. So they buy 10% to drive their heating, and they have an annual CUP for cooling of 30. So they buy 3% to drive the cooling. So
Grøn, I think we're almost out of time. Thank you. Thanks very much. You're hearing all these successes. I'm going to introduce Samantha. But New York and Massachusetts, I work all over the country. New York and Massachusetts are way ahead of everybody. I keep getting asked, well, you know, California is the greenest state around. Well, we just don't have the same press they do, okay? Samantha, you've got a great program. You want to tell us, even though you are in the States?
Yes, I'm from the very foreign nation of Massachusetts. But I did do my undergraduate degree in upstate New York, and so a lot of my education was based around New York policy and information. So I really appreciated being able to stay involved with NY-GEO and hear a lot about the great work they're doing in New York. So I think Massachusetts and New York, as you mentioned, are in very similar paths where we've both realized if we're looking to cut greenhouse gas emissions significantly by 2050, which tends to be the main target here, heating and cooling has to be a critical piece of that. DG has come a long way over the past decade, but we're at a point now where we've really identified a lot of the low-hanging fruit for solar and distributed generation. And you know, we're not going to see leaps and bounds of greenhouse gas emissions in those industries. I think really they're going to start getting smarter, but we've done a lot of the major reductions that we can do in the electrical sector. And so, you know, heating and cooling has the potential to provide incredible greenhouse gas savings. In Massachusetts alone, we have 30% of our residential homes are on fuel oil. And we have 2 really big natural gas moratoriums in Western Mass and on Cape Cod, where you're not allowed to have new natural gas hookups, and so you're having people installing new fuel oil systems, and now that's 30 years before there's any even consideration about fuel switching. So I think both, you know, Meserve in Massachusetts and our kind of Meserve counterpart, which is the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, have really tried to focus on heating and cooling and how we can support the industry, and I think that we have a lot of similarities in the programs that we're running. Yesterday during the NYSERDA presentation on their programs, in my head I was checking off like, yes, we have a program like that as well, and we have something coming up. And so it's great to see a lot of the same programs rolling out in these 2 states, because we're going to learn so much across the 2 industries, and we'll really be able to learn from, you know, what worked in the New York community campaigns, what worked in the Massachusetts campaigns, and how can we integrate those 2 together for the next round. And Massachusetts, I think, you know, we're doing things that are different from New York, and so I hope that, you know, that we can provide some insight on the things that we're doing differently, and hopefully help New York develop their programs. The main thing I think that's different right now is the program that I work on particularly, which is our Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. So this is a market-based production program that provides alternative energy certificates for renewable heating and cooling technology. So ground source heat pumps, obviously, but also air source heat pumps, biomass, biogas, biofuels, solar thermal, fuel cells, waste energy, name it, and it's there. So we spent a long time trying to develop this program and make it as comprehensive as possible, while also trying to keep it simple and reliable and something that can be verified, which was the perfect storm of trying to design a program. And so right now we've rolled out the program beginning in January, and so I think we're learning a lot about how this program is being implemented, particularly in the ground source industry, and what we can do better. And then obviously learning from the ground source industry what are some major issues that they're seeing. I think one of the biggest issues that we've seen in Massachusetts is financing has been really not unstable, but there's been a lot of changes. So the ACS program was passed into law in 2014, and then it took us until early this year to roll that out. So there was a lot of people that held off on installing systems because they wanted to know what our program requirements were, and I think that had an unfortunate effect on the market where it really slowed things down. Obviously, the IPC has been a big topic of conversation the last couple of days, had a very similar impact. People, we were being promised that it was going to come back, but, no one's going to invest, tens of thousands of dollars with the promise that the government is going to bring something back. So it's very uncertain. So, Mass Clean Energy Center, they offer rebates for these technologies, and so they've, been able to step up and ramp up their incentive values. But now, as the ICC and the ACS program have rolled out, they're pulling their incentive values back. So there's been a lot of peaks and valleys in the incentives that Massachusetts has been able to offer. And so I think one of the big things that we're hoping to do is provide some stability in the financing, which I think hopefully will help the industry. Obviously an installer isn't going to quote an incentive that they're not sure about, because if in 6 months that's gone, then you're on the hook for quoting your customer, and it was nothing that could be in your control. So I think if anything, the Massachusetts perspective that we can hopefully provide is our experience with the programs that we're implementing, helping New York with their programs, and then also just what we're hearing from our market, which is provide stability and funding, keep things simple, help educate the market, and hopefully that'll help everything continue to grow for everyone.
Thank you, Samantha. One thing, before I open this up, I'm going to address two things. One is both in New York and in Massachusetts. We recognized that these are going to be fantastic programs, and they were smart enough in New York and Massachusetts to put codicils in there. In other words, you've got to be qualified, you've got to be certified, you've got to carry the credentials so that, and same way with OGA up in Canada. We do recognize that once government subsidies come in, people come out of the woodwork. And for those folks that are in here that have experienced this, like Helle in the back and Billy and a bunch of other people, NY-GEO is fighting against that. I know in Massachusetts you've got the HPA certifications also. In Canada we do also. But Jim said something that is really telling, and that is we have less than, I'll say, 2% of the market. Forever we were fighting one another for that 2%. So if Hal found it, I went over and stole it off of Hal, and then Jim stole it off of me. And by the time it got down to whoever put the damn thing in, no one was making any money. Well, we're stopping that now. So that's what's happening now. And we're seeing this go rampant across the country, because the New York and Massachusetts are the models that I'm being asked about all the time. I'll open up. The audience has questions. And I want to thank everybody, by the way. Hal?
Hello. Just like to ask the fellow from Canada there how he feels that the geology here in New York equates to the geology that you experience there.
We have anything and everything in Ontario. We have active water in places. We have rock at various depths. So drilling is a challenge in Ontario, I would say, in most places. So you have to be well versed in being able to handle, especially if you want to drill deeper holes. I'm not a driller per se, but certainly you're into rotary type drill with, working with the case to rock. They're doing deeper holes, and then use air to do the bottom portions in the rock. So we have a very diverse geology, and sometimes a challenge. But we have a huge rural market where we can put in horizontal loops, right? Like a lot of the conversations are around vertical loops, but we have what we refer to as a low-hanging fruit, where rural communities with no access to gas, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of housing units that are on oil, propane, or straight electric. So,
instituted that minimum put links, and I guess that's what I was talking about, and how you feel the two compare. You feel that we should be looking maybe more of that, the incentives towards that versus per system capacity?
Well, we have, like I said, we have a very diverse group around the table representing all the manufacturers. We have a good cross-section of, we have a couple drillers on the board. We have 5 manufacturers. So we wanted to ensure, because of past failures and shortcomings in programs, that, you know, some of the good old boys, they'd say, you know what, I always put in 150 feet per ton and it work, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, gets a little cold in the winter or down around 25 degrees, but still functions. We wanted to eliminate that kind of thing happening, so we came up with a criteria, what we felt was a good comfort level that would ensure efficiency of systems based on the cross-section of geology. And when they're giving you a $3,000 per ton incentive for a vertical loop, there is absolutely no reason to shortchange people in them. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
I had 2 questions, if I could. And one is for Helle. I'm not sure how many people here are really familiar with the Renewable Thermal Alliance and what it does, and if you could talk about that in your event coming up. But first, maybe if I could go to Samantha and ask, on a typical installation in Massachusetts, a 4-ton installation, what are the incentives that people would get on something like that?
Right. So for the ATS program, it's all based on square footage of the facility that you're installing the system. We really tried to make it simple and not have to depend so much on the actual system design. So we looked at a lot of residential energy consumption data, and we basically established that if you're installing a system in this size house in a typical Massachusetts building, we would expect that it would require this much heat. And if it requires this much heat, then we can predict over 10 years what your system should be producing, because we do require that you use 100% geothermal and remove your backup besides an emergency system. And so I think for a typical maybe 2,000, 2,500 square foot house, it would be anywhere from maybe $7,000 to $10,000 for the ATS. Maybe a little less. There's an additional incentive that you can get if you're installed in a very efficient building. So hers is rating less than 50, or if you can have a P certified that your building is zero net energy. On top of that, we have the CEC rebate. I'm not exactly sure the particular level of those, but I think they match pretty closely, maybe a little less than the ATS incentive. And then we also, there's other funding that aren't direct incentives, but we have our Massachusetts heat loan, which is a 0% loan for 7 years that ground source systems can qualify for. So I know financing was a big topic. So I think when you loop those 3 together, and then with the ITC, there's really incredible potential for financing in Massachusetts.
just one more answer. Yeah, ask one more question.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking, Bill. And so the Renewable Thermal Alliance was established in 2016 to try to establish infrastructure for financing, to enable financing to scale the market for renewable heating and cooling. And it brings together different stakeholders in the industry. We have currently 220 members, and we try to enable and foster dialogue and sharing of best practices. And we have been focusing a lot on standardization because we think that will help the industry in the region to grow better if it's standardized contracts and processes and stuff like that. We have also been focusing a lot on performance metrics. Kind of the market needs to know how well the technologies perform in order to trust them and in order to build new business models and new financing products. And that's the thought is that will help kind of spur a bigger growth in the market. And we want to do that through dialogue. We have a broad group of stakeholders, and I think we have great dialogue here. So yeah, and it's open for everyone. And just let me know if you want to be on the distribution.
Anyone else? Oh, there you go.
Question for Göran. What town in Switzerland is that smart thermal loop that you referenced?
It's a town called Friesenberg, and the one with the high performance values is in Zurich.
I have a question for Göran and Helle. Do you believe that the main reason why you're so advanced with geothermal and renewable heating and cooling is because all of your electricity was produced through imported oil? You think that was a big issue, or?
Well, the issue was that lots of houses had oil, and we have a lot of renewable electricity. We have a lot of hydropower. We also have nuclear still. So the electricity price has been comparatively low.
Okay. Is that the same? Is that the same in Norway?
So the biggest difference is that while Sweden had a lot of oil and built their homes with hot water distribution, in Norway the houses have been built with electric resistance. So that's actually been an issue when you want to grow the market for heating and cooling, that you're actually lacking that infrastructure. Yeah.
So you had baseboard resistant heat.
Yes. Yeah.
We still have a share of that too, but there was a government subsidy to switch from electric resistance heater and to install hydronic system, not specifically for ground source heat pump, but there was a subsidy for the switching, which enables the use of other heating options.
Yeah, and I want to add to that because it just says how important it is to try to get the infrastructure for the right, so just the infrastructure in the building, that's an important aspect to allow for the renewable technologies that we want to have.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
For Helle and Göran, I just want to ask, we've all been hearing a lot about how increasing the penetration of heat pumps would, the effect that would have on the electric consumption. So I want to ask, can you speak about what percentage of electric consumption can be attributed to heat pumps in your respective countries?
I cannot, but the thing is that, heat pumps, so air source heat pumps in Norway would reduce electricity because we have the baseboard. So it's kind of a different, coming into it from a different angle. But I also know that there's a lot of air source heat pumps, and I think the system operators still don't see it on their load. So it's kind of an indication.
Heat pumps, ground source heat pumps contribute to about 20% of the heating demand for buildings in Sweden. And then there are additional heat pumps. So about 40% of the building stock have heat pumps of some sort, but 20% for ground source heat pumps.
Let me just add to that. In a study that was done in Western Farmers in Oklahoma, which is a rural electric co-op, and one that's been verified by Oak Ridge National Labs, they discovered for every ton of installed capacity, it reduced peak load by 0.55 kW. So the other thing that I think we have to start doing is stop talking BTUs, let's start talking kW. What a concept, huh? We won't get the metrics, Jim, but we can get the kW. Yeah. Anyone else?
So Dermot, my friend, keeps telling me how we're the third world in terms of heat pumps. I'm listening to Scandinavian countries. I sort of think we're much worse than that. Is there a understanding of the word heat pump throughout your society? Because I think that's probably one of the real lacking factors. Heat pump what? Is this something that is commonly understood?
Yes, I would say so. A couple of years ago, I was astonished to watch a show on TV where they made jokes involving ground source heat pumps. So that means that it's commonly known. There was also a question of what people wanted to have in a new house. It was a swimming pool or ground source heat pump. The ground source heat pump came in second. So it's well known. This was a kind of a market study made by people selling houses. And another, see what was it I talked about? There are some things like that. Well, it's rather well known at least. But yes, when you sell a house, if you're selling a single family house and you don't have a ground source heat pump installed, you're advised as kind of a home styling to install the heat pump before you sell it, because it will give your house a higher value to gain by installing heat pump, even if you're not going to use it yourself.
But the one thing I think you were addressing is heat pumps in the United States had a bad name, or have a bad name, because of we have cheap gas, we have, there's electric resistance. I think that's changing. I was the director of the Geothermal Heat Pump Consortium, and you've heard the term geo-exchange. They thought that geothermal would confuse people, and that they would have to ask, well, I'm in marketing, I want you to ask. So I think that heat pump connotation is sort of going away. People are recognizing what the value is, especially with geothermal. Air-to-air still gets a little bit of a rap that they're doing better with air-to-air also. So it's my heart. They found the heart. No, sorry about that. I would do that to someone who did that to me. Not like a dumbass that had it on the thing. Anyone else have a question?
Could we hear from Helle in response to the question that was asked about how well they know heat pumps in Norway?
Sure. So, yeah, I think Norway also started out on a low level of awareness 20 years ago. But then there's been, in periods where you've had the combination of cold weather and low precipitation, there's been a lot of campaigns around heat pumps, because particularly air source heat pumps has been passed to implement or to sell. So it's been kind of a combination of a small subsidy. There's been a lot of focus combined with, media attention around high electricity prices. So that's kind of grown the attention, and yeah, I think now people are very well aware. And I also would like to mention an important driver for ground source heat pumps that I don't see here is that there's the new construction market has been very important.
I think also that air source heat pump contributes to the awareness of ground source heat pumps, because if you have those houses on direct electric resistance heating, they usually install air source heat pumps. So they just heat the air, but it contributes to the awareness of heat pumps.
Yeah. And then, one important thing to be concerned about is the quality of the installation. So I just want to put that out there. That from that perspective, that's also important for the geothermal.
Follow up to Göran. What's the ratio of air source to ground source in Sweden? Under 500,000 residential units?
I'm not completely sure about the number of installations of air source, but it's a larger number than the ground source heat pumps. But they are usually quite small in capacity compared to ground source.
Tony and Jim, what's the percentage of where are we in England and Canada? We're less than 2% in the U.S. Where are we in the UK? Sorry.
In terms of the UK, I would say air source. It comes back to the new heat alternative that got launched. So there was a mad rush to put biomass as I call it, and then that shifted to when the tariffs were adjusted to an air source heat pump solution, and that tariff has now been reduced for air source heat pumps and biomass. And so ground source heat pumps are now becoming more popular. In terms of the proportion, I don't know. But it's definitely a growing market on the residential side. On the commercial side, it's fallen off a cliff, unfortunately, from the direction it was heading in 2005, which is a real shame. But it comes back to my original point about the two types of developers. the developers looking to build fast and cheap and then sell, they need the planning stick as opposed to the carrots from incentives. And those are, and I regard those guys as our enemies.
In Canada in general, in terms of geothermal or ground source market penetration, we are less than 1% total market penetration. We were asked to build some stats, realizing that we were going into we had just lived with 2 years without any incentives and a pretty downtime in geothermal industry where a lot of us actually diversified out of the need to survive. In the year prior to the incentives being introduced in Ontario, we would have probably installed for sure less than 1,000 geothermal systems in the entire province, residentially. And at that same period, they installed over 20,000 air source. So it's a significant magnitude. But on the other end, I look at it as a huge opportunity because we can easily ramp up and do far more capacity than that. And if we work together, that's why we as the OGA partner, we wanted to get, there's been a constant challenge getting the industry to cooperate and play in the same sandbox as the other technologies. We all want to represent ourselves, right? We have people fighting to represent us. If we want to be recognized as a credible HVAC choice for people, we have to play in the same sandbox with the oils and propanes and air source and all the others and extol our virtues to the general population. We can't continue to isolate ourselves and fight with each other. So there's huge market potential, but we're starting from a small number. And I think that's the case across North America.
Once again, an opportunity, I want to thank the panel, and I want to tell you that the reason why this is growing is because of NY-GEO, OGA, HBA, and all the people that give their time for no pay. But we got a raise this year, right? We're still getting zero. But this industry is really growing, and if you're in it, you're in it to win it, and that's what we're doing. Thanks very much. Thank the panel, including our foreign representative from Massachusetts. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from the NY-GEO 2018 conference. We would like to thank our sponsors, exhibitors, speakers, and attendees for making this such a great event. For more information on this conference, including speaker bios, presentation slides, great photographs, and more session recordings, go to our website at nygeo.org. That's ny-geo.org. Thanks.